Morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday meeting of the BOCC under our budget review. We'll just start right up. Kathy?
Okay, Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Director. And so we have Health and Human Services, which has several different funds to present today. Thanks. And so the first one is Veterans Relief Fund. And for this one, I really there isn't anything to highlight. They're on track on most of their targets and for revenue as well as expenses.
That's just kind of a list of our funds, so we know which is which.
Like I said, they have a lot of funds.
And they're coming in to visit us on the 15th, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you get the dollars for the Veterans Relief Fund semi-annually?
Yes, predominantly because this is this is a portion of our property
tax, yeah.
taxes that's set aside for veterans relief. The next one is the chemical dependency mental health. This one is the sales tax that has been sunsetted. That's the appropriate word. And so we
Fine, going back to the,
veterans.
yeah, you're
Okay,
going a
sure,
little
I'm
faster
sorry.
than I can keep up with you.
Okay, so sorry.
Uh,
Do you have a question on the veterans relief?
I'm surprised that the revenue total is 1.2 million. I guess, what am I missing? So in the current year budget, that doesn't add up, right?
Well, the revenue total includes the beginning balance, fund balance,
Right.
which is, that's part of that one.
Oh, and that's.
Okay,
55.
so I noticed something, it didn't include the taxes. The taxes line is missing
That's,
again.
that's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll get a new one printed out for you. But as far as the tax revenue, currently, we're sitting at $128,512. And that is on track with our target of $127,479.
Okay, so if I multiply that by 2, that's what I would sort of expect
Yeah.
to scale out.
Yeah. And there's monies that come in every month, but the two predominant just receipts for this tax is April and October.
Yeah. And revenue is as simple as just that line, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the miscellaneous is
I'm going to turn to
investment income.
expenses. Slow
Okay.
is.
And then for
No, the chairman
expenses,
is going to chide me for being so slow, but
that's okay.
I'm a lot older than he is.
I'm going to savor that for a few months here.
Yeah, on the expenses, their predominant expense are services that are dispersed. And they are below the target. The target, if you just did a 12-month average, it's year to date, we would be at 145,000, and they're at about 65,000 expenditures.
Okay, the 13,967 is our commitment from the general fund to pay for HHS handling the fund.
Yes, that's it's just a portion of a person.
Yeah. And what's the reason that we seem to be falling behind? I don't want to say it in a pejorative way. Why are the year-to-date actuals on this services lower than the budget would expect?
I'm not sure.
The actuals are what we've expended so far in assistance. So what we put into budget is a really, really rough estimate.
Right, but you've got, so if I took last year's expenditures, if I took the time to read, I would find out that at this time last year, we were about on the par.
Yeah, we're about on par with last year. Last year was at 49,000 at this point in time.
So we can expect the end fund balance to increase till the end, increase again. So next year, in February, we might be at about 1.2 million.
I don't know what they have planned for the rest of the year,
Yeah.
so.
The reason.
But
is-
at the current rate of expenses going out, yeah, that
Yeah.
reserve's gonna grow.
So there are, I'm worried that a chunk of money always looks like, let's spend it. And we should, but on something that is useful. And I think Jana's doing a good job of trying to figure out what can be done. But the last thing I want to do is add yet another welfare agency on there to consume the money.
Yeah. I've said on the last two, and they are working on bylaws to open some up. And I don't see any great big changes, but they are trying to bring some up more modern to what expenses are today. And I think that's one of the things they want to talk to us
Mhm.
about on the 15th is some changes to their bylaws.
Oh, that's on the schedule?
Yeah. August 15th, they'll be
Oh,
in.
August 15th, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been
Yeah.
talking about increasing the amounts in the different assistance categories. So that will be one thing we go over with the board at that work session.
Yeah, we recently did that, the relief fund, anyhow, right, last year sometime?
They did do a small increase last year. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's got to be a lot of thinking and analysis there because again, I don't want, this is not a convenience net, it's a safety net.
Mhm.
And we don't want to abuse that. And of the things that I know, the veterans have problems with transportation. In fact, all old people have trouble with transportation. I mean, I can't find my car sometimes. No. Um,
I'm not even going to talk about the briefcase.
Very good. Or how about my hearing aids?
Yeah.
Uh, You know where my hearing aids were?
Mm-mm.
In my wife's purse.
Oh, that's a good spot for them.
I went for a couple of days trying to find them.
Oh, my goodness. I always tell my husband, check on top of the dryer.
Yeah.
It's usually where everything is.
uh, and so it's transportation. The other one is still seemingly housing, and I don't know how to do that. We were trying to work with Kelso in their development, right?
Mhm.
It's a good time to ask.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how's that? We were looking at that for elderly also, and veteran preference even.
Yes, I don't believe they've started that project. I think they're still securing some funding, but the board did approve some funding towards that project that would set some units aside for seniors and veterans was part of the.
With
idea.
some hooks, that would be maybe a good place to use some of that money. But, all right, thank you.
Okay. Ready for chemical dependency, mental health, behavioral health? This one, again, this morning we made a last minute change to make the font bigger on some of the numbers. And so the line for taxes, again, is missing on this one. So, but the bar graph has the information as far as the taxes. And this is the sales tax revenue that has been sunsetted. So all of the tax revenue that we're showing as of right now is predominantly everything that we're going to get into this fund for the year. And so we're sitting at currently about $744,000 for actuals through June. And this time last year, we had $1.3 million coming into this fund. But that's because of the sunset.
More slowly, so right now the 744 is what we have spent so
Collected,
far.
what we've collected in
I'm
revenues.
looking at revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our revenues, that's what we've collected so far on revenues. And I don't anticipate anything else coming in on that fund because of the sunset. So we're pretty predominantly on that one. On the taxes, we budgeted a little over 800,000. So we're pretty close. We're 92% of budget. There's a little bit that trickles in for the remaining of the year for people that are filing late taxes and things like that. But I don't anticipate anything else significant coming in on revenues. Okay, on expenses. The expenses for this fund are primarily transfers out to other departments. And we've budgeted $2.8 million for those transfers. We're sitting at currently a little over $1 million for the actuals year to date. And at this point in time last year, we were at $1.2 million. So we're lagging for last year a little bit. But that's because this year, for example, in the sheriff's department, instead of having a they actually have a transfer now for their behavioral health services instead of it being an actual expense. So that's where it was last year in services.
Yeah. We brought those bodies in-house.
Right, to the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And these numbers include the fact that we went from 4 down to 2?
Yes, mhm. That amendment was a budget amendment that went in last time. So we're pretty much tracking on those as far as we're a little bit lagging on the transfers from a budget percentage, but that's because most departments turn in their request for reimbursement a month to 2 months behind. So it doesn't quite track with the 12-month target that we have here. But I don't see any concerns on any of the expenditures and meeting budget.
So the earliest, if we wish, the earliest we need to impose that the behavioral health tax on would be 26 sometime,
Yeah,
maybe 27 even, if we wanted to, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and then the next fund we'll talk about is substance abuse, Human Services Department. This one too, it doesn't have any taxes, but it has intergovernmental revenues. And so those are lagging a bit from where we place the budget. But the state contracts run on a different cycle than ours. They run July to June. Therefore, the budget was based upon those contracts. And the cost reimbursements were based upon revenue. And they also correlate to the expenditures because we're receiving billings from subcontractors. So some contractors, I believe they describe some contracts bill more from July to December than they do from January to June. So, and And then some are actually paid quarterly based upon state contract requirements. So in this one, we've received $745,000. Last year at this point in time, we were at $903,000.
These are what you classify as grants that you're constantly applying for?
These are this fund primarily is the developmental disabilities contract and the criminal justice treatment account. This is the fund that those particular grants get funneled through.
So it isn't basically what you receive in is what you bill out to them.
Up to a limit.
Right, so they're all cost reimbursement.
Right.
Well, if the CJTA, they send kind of a lump sum that we have
Do
to
they?
reconcile.
Okay.
But the DD contract is all cost reimbursement, so providers submit billing to us and then we submit to the state based
Yeah.
on what that looks like.
So a lot of what you see that's actually come in is based on stuff we're being reimbursed for.
Right.
So if we're being reimbursed for less or we're submitting less, that's going to be less.
Mhm.
But we see this at discrete intervals. You come to us and say, I've got a contract
Mhm.
and so forth.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
The 10, yeah, go ahead.
these are one of the ones where I describe it as a line of credit. We basically, state says you have this amount you can draw from.
Mhm. Yeah, they set up the kind of our budget for us and we work with the providers and.
Do you know what we would do if we overdrew?
If, it wouldn't be allowed.
There's no going back and saying, what you gave us was not enough?
I mean, the contracts we get from the state have an up to amount. So if we wanted to go beyond that amount, we would have to talk to the state to see if that's,
Right.
yeah.
right. Have we done that before?
Not in a long time, not in a very long time.
Yeah, no, I think you do a good job managing to those constraints. But I know that the ASO sometimes, I mean, it's got pots of money of different kinds and it's hard to predict. And they will go
Mhm.
back to the HCA
Mm,
and say, and the HCA will say, okay, you get another chunk of money.
yeah, yeah.
So that always causes me to ask, where are all these chunks of money coming from?
Well,
His pocket.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
his pocket.
and sometimes they'll ask counties too, if you anticipate a lot of unspent in your
Oh,
contract, and that's where they get the chunk of money sometimes,
Yeah.
is they'll kind of redistribute it. Yeah.
Are you ready to look at the expenses? So the expenses track and coincide again with the revenue. They're based upon the state contract period, July through June. And so our expenditures are lower than what we have in total budget, but that coincides and correlates with the revenue side as well.
at the end of a year, if everything were accounted for, I'd expect the revenue and the expenses to zero out.
Yeah,
And so what
that's-
I'm looking here is a lag between the 500K and the 720K.
Yeah, so on services, but you also have personnel expenses. You have services of 590 as of right now. And then you have some personnel, 65,000, and then a little bit in transfers. So you're close to the 700,000 right now. The 590 and the 65,
Yeah,
so.
for managing the contracts, you get how much you generally use?
Like for our admin,
Yeah,
With DD, we are allowed to draw down up to 10% of the contract. We bill actual time. The same with CJTA. I think it's 10% that is the maximum allowed.
And are you are you at 10% or do you I recalled you generally aren't quite that high.
It's generally enough to cover our cost of administering the grant. Yeah.
That means that, yeah, you do use a full 10%.
We do sometimes. It depends on the contract. Some are more complicated than others, but yeah.
Okay. The next fund is the Health Department Fund. And this is predominantly, again, they're predominantly intergovernmental is most of their revenue sources, but they also have licenses and permits and some goods and services as well. And you'll notice in the year-to-date actuals, there's a negative under other financing sources, and that's related to the leases and that GASB entry being reversed in January. And then our intergovernmental revenue actually exceeds our target a little bit. We're at 72% of our total revenue budget. But that has to do with, I think there are some grants in this one where you receive the full amount upfront.
The licenses,
Licenses and permits, for some reason, when we went and changed our fonts, that line disappeared also, but it's in the bar graph. So on your licenses and permits, we're currently at $622,000 basically. And prior year at this point in time, we were at 632,000. So we're tracking fairly consistently with where we were at this point in time last year. And we're just slightly above our budget, our target for budget.
so this is for Jane or for Carol. So that's revenue for permits for restaurants, wells,
Mhm.
those kinds of things.
Exactly. And
Beg your
some of them are paid annually at the beginning of the year, and then others are paid throughout the year.
Yeah.
So
And what is our obligation? Like, what keeps us from charging $1 million for a $100 permit?
the board, approve our fee schedule. We try to keep it as close to actual cost as possible. So we do those kind of assessments every few years to determine if what we're charging for the fee covers our cost of doing that work. And
It's not a year-to-year adjustment of any kind then?
it's usually not year to year, but we try to take a look every couple of years.
When was the last time we made an adjustment?
Last year, I don't think we had any significant changes.
Last year, but I think the majority of it was-
So again, you're just trying to do cost recovery for that
Mhm.
service. So this personnel and people on other funds don't come into this fund in terms of wanting,
Right.
you don't subsidize, you don't use this fund to subsidize other
No.
things.
Okay, any more questions?
The health permits for restaurants,
Mhm.
can you give me a price range or what the determinants are?
It varies depending on the size of the restaurant and the food that's being served. So if it's a higher risk food and the restaurant has the ability to serve a large number of people, that permit's going to be more than a smaller restaurant that might serve lower risk food or a smaller number of people. So it's kind of a risk-based fee structure.
On the food types, I understand. The size of the restaurant, I'm not sure I understand why that plays a factor.
I think just the more people coming through, so they'd be potentially serving more of the public than other smaller restaurants.
But your job isn't to count the number of heads that go through the restaurant, it's to make sure that the cooking is done.
The food is safe, yeah.
Yeah, so do you understand why the number of clients should matter? You're not an insurance company or anything.
No.
I would say the larger the restaurant, the larger number of customers, the bigger the menu, the more complicated their cooking processes usually are. Play into it.
Yeah, okay, I had lumped that into the first category, the food types and all that, so. If I only served hamburgers, but I had 100,000 people every day, I would pay much more than if I only had 100 people. Yet I'm serving the same hamburgers.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Anyhow, we're, any regulations that the margins in some of the restaurants, there are a lot of little restaurants that just shut down. They just
Mhm.
can't make it. And I don't know whether, like, if I said they paid $380 a year, would that seem about normal for the low end?
Yeah,
High for the low.
yeah, I know, I don't,
Yeah.
Okay. all
Without
right,
looking at it.
so it's not abusive.
I don't think so,
I mean, I
yeah.
think the low might be $100 for like a low hazard, small, simple, if we're going in, we're doing one inspection. It's generally we inspect twice a year, is that correct?
Yeah, twice a year.
So, and if one thing we do is if we go into a restaurant and we find a lot of things wrong, and we find that repetitively, we will add an extra inspection in the following years until that establishment has proved cooked safely. So that also plays into it.
And is your responsibility the big supermarkets also?
Mhm.
That's got to be tricky.
Yeah, the Safeways and the Fred Meyers, they
Yeah.
have, yeah.
Okay, on the expenditures for the health department, the primary expenditure here is personnel. And so we are slightly below our target for budget. We're at 45%, almost 46%. And we would expect to be about 50% at this point in time. They do have a few open positions that may be contributing to being a little bit below our budget. Supplies are slightly above our budget. And so and that's primarily, I researched this and it was due to the GASB entry that was made and was reversed in 2024. So you'll see the same explanation for our capital expense has a negative due to the GASB entry.
On the personnel, what is the impact to the public from the fact that you have 2 FTEs open?
So the particular FTEs that are open were in the environmental health services section. So we're down a food inspector. So we are, the impact to the public is we're you know, most restaurants we inspect twice a year and we try to keep to that. We are trying to tread the water there with trying to meet that standard with being down an inspector. So we've had to make some adjustments with prioritizing higher risk places and things like that while we're trying to refill those positions.
That would seem like the natural thing you would do. So, I mean, whenever I see that there are unfilled positions or openings
Mhm.
and we're continuing operation, I'm like, doesn't that tell you you don't? Now, when I argue with the court or the sheriff, they throw overtime in my face. Are we dealing with overtime in these issues here?
We've not, no. We have tried to just prioritize the facilities and the establishments. We do have someone kind of ready to help fill in if needed, but we haven't called on that person yet to be able to do that. So
Well, I would continue to encourage us to be very careful about bringing on new staff. We ought to look at that as a long-term obligation.
yeah, we did just recently fill the one environmental health specialist position. So we're in the middle of training for that position now, and we're still interviewing for the lead position. Yeah.
Okay, are we ready for the next fund? The next fund is Human Services Department. This is the fund that has your general human services overhead and some grants. And so you have some taxes coming in on this fund. This again is from property taxes. So it's predominantly comes in twice a year. So we're slightly, well, we're actually almost ideally on track for where we at budget on our target. And so we brought in $285,000, and last year at this point in time, we were at $273,000 on taxes. And then intergovernmental is smaller amount. It's a bit lagging, but it's not material to the overall revenues. And so there's really nothing here that has any concern as far as meeting budget.
What does this division, what does it serve?
The fund,
Right.
okay, so it's primarily where you have your human services overhead, and I think she is on this sheet. They have a little explanation of what the fund is, the community development block grant and other programs.
So this particular fund is the group at top that manages all that?
Mhm.
Oh. So this is Fund 13-101, 14-0, and so forth.
Yeah, this particular one is Fund 14-001
And only 14.
and OT, and only that one.
The CDBG stuff is passed through, right?
Mhm.
And the general human services overhead, is that just the operation of your facility essentially?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And other programs, do we have any in history to recount?
I don't know if we have Carol, do you know if we have any other programs right now? No, but it kind of serves as the go-to if it doesn't fall into one of the other fund types.
And the revenue comes from the pass-throughs, the contracts, right?
On the on the intergovernmental, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The taxes are actually a portion of the property taxes that's allocated to this. Are you ready to go to the expenses? So on the expenses, personnel and services are the two highest expenses for this fund. And our personnel is just slightly below, it's below target. And our other areas are not material off from our target for budget. And transfers are typically made in the third or fourth quarter. So, and there's a total of currently seven FTEs.
I assume in this fund, I'll find the IT expenses?
Yes,
Yes?
yes, yes. Okay, I'll go to the next fund that we have for you is the opioid fund. And for this one, most of the revenues showing up in our miscellaneous revenue category. We recently amended the budget to account for those contracts or those settlements that have been signed. The Janssen, we expect to receive another settlement for Kroger, which was signed and turned in, and we got confirmation that they've received it. So we'll be amending the budget probably later in the year for that particular settlement. It's not included in this revenue budget yet.
That's also paid out over umpteen years?
I'm not sure on that one.
Trying to recall, Lauren, it's 11 years comes to mind on that one, but I'd have to verify.
Yeah.
It's kind of all over the board, isn't it? Some are
Yeah, they don't
longer
have
and
it
some is-
yeah, they don't have it posted on the portal.
Yeah,
You know, I think I look for in things is always the consistency, and if
Mhm.
they're
Yeah.
not consistent, then I have to
They're not
figure out
consistent.
why.
yeah.
And generally, there's not much of a rationale for why.
Well, these have been kind of all over the board. They're not consistent.
Yeah. And how much is that one?
The Kroger?
The Kroger one?
I'm not sure what our portion is, less than the Janssen. So in the Janssen, we received all in lump sum, that was 900,000. So that's really the only revenue that we have on this, this fund. And then for expenses have not been budgeted. We have most of the fund sitting in the fund balance until those are decided. There's just a small percentage of a personnel, and that's it. That's administering the fund. The next fund that we have is our low-income housing and operation and maintenance. That's Fund 18401. For that fund, we have a little bit of tax revenue coming in. And then we have, but predominantly, most of the revenue is intergovernmental. We have a little bit over $3 million budgeted there. Year to date, we have $1.2 million that's been received. And so it's lagging due to some timing differences. But our expenses are also lagging as well. I think this is the Department of Commerce contract, and it runs on the state fiscal year, July to June, and it's cost reimbursement as well. And really everything else is tracking very well on the revenue side.
What's the O and M?
I'm not sure. Just,
Yeah.
I think it's been just the name of the fund, and it's been that name for quite a while.
Because O and M was the,
No, I think it had something to do with what the treasurer's office has to list the name of it as, has something to do with the document recording fees themselves. Because all these names are kind of off, have you noticed? The one that says substance use and developmental disabilities, and we're can't change that.
you can't because of us or because of the state?
I don't know. I think we've worked with the treasurer and the auditor before, and we're just not able to do that, and I don't know.
Well, I have a lot of confidence in Kathy's ability to fix things, so,
Names drive us crazy.
yeah, well, that's one of the items on your to-do list, right?
A lot of these are doc recording.
Yeah, in the goods and services, that's what that revenue is, your portion of the doc recording fees. And so we did bring the budget down for
Yeah.
this one compared to last year's budget,
They've been declining a little
Right.
bit, yeah.
but we're still tracking very well with where we put the budget, where we pegged it for. So we should make our budget without a problem.
So just to be sure I understand, for our purposes, if we left off and O and M, that'd be fine. Okay.
Think so. We'll look at it. We'll see if we can do something about that.
So in the intergovernmental, it's about $1 million difference from last year at this time. That's just that's a timing thing.
Mhm. Yep, and our expenses are down.
Yeah, because a lot of this is reimbursement, so it's just kind of a timing thing.
Yeah.
But our contract, I mean, our budget is fairly consistent with prior year actuals. So,
Yeah,
and then on the, if you want to go to the expense side, that too, our services are down because of subcontractor billings, and it correlates with our revenue being slightly down.
Yeah.
So at this point, we've got about $1.9 million we've expensed, and last year we had about 2.3 that we had expensed at the same time.
I'm gonna back up to the opioid just for a minute. It's not really a question. It's just, you get some comments on what we're doing with that money. And I think the sense that I've gotten from this board up here is we're looking at juvenile and maybe if it's possible to use some of that for some alterations over there. So I think that's one of the reasons we're just kind of looking to see if that's even possible. On that, the architect, I expect to see, we got an update and we should see plans on that, I think, this week. And then I'll meet with that
Yeah.
small committee and then we'll actually bring it to the board and you kind of look and basically what that'll say, if it's even possible and if we want to move forward, that will be the decision.
Yeah, if I could add on that, what it if we take a look at the expenditures that we do in the government arena, uh, the growth of the expenditures is matched by the growth of the problems. And you'd kind of look long enough and from a high enough altitude and you say, we're doing sort of the wrong things. One piece of the wrong things is, like we talked on the Veterans Relief Board, there's this chunk of money, let's go spend it. And there's not much thought given to specifically what problem are we trying to solve and how are we going to do that? And that's what you're trying to do here is say, yes, there's money coming in, but let's spend it wisely and in keeping with the intent of the money.
Yeah.
It's fairly simple, actually. But it's so attractive to have all those dollars there. But we get 5% on anything we haven't spent.
What was that? We have.
The revenue of what we have in account at the treasurers,
Oh, the investment income.
Mm.
Mhm.
not that that makes up for inflation.
We had an investment committee last Thursday also, and it's good results.
I'm sorry?
It's good results.
Yeah,
I think, I don't have the paper in front of me, but I think projected, it's about $20 million in earnings that we're projecting out for this year, just off the investment fund.
we know that some colleges don't need to charge any fee. They've got such a big endowment.
Yeah. They get tuition reimbursement, Arn, so.
Hmm.
Talking about those fees that go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that concludes all of the funds that, and I don't know if y'all have anything else y'all want to add.
Are you sure you haven't missed one?
No, I think we got them all.
We appreciate your time coming in today.
Next we have IT.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to give you a handout.
That whole, that's an odd thing because the funding doesn't come from the county. It all comes from the state and all these myriad of different things they do with it, and the relationship between that and us is just kind of an odd thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're presenting the quarterly results for IT, and they basically have two funds. The first one that we're showing is their technology reserve account. And this one, basically, there's an annual transfer that comes into this reserve fund from IT, the IT Technology Fund, and it's basically for major equipment replacements. And we haven't booked that yet, but we will be making that entry here later this month. So, and then they also receive investment income. And we didn't put a budget in there, and so we're probably going to go ahead and amend that in our next budget amendment because they are earning funds on their reserve fund.
The other funding sources is?
That's a transfer in from IT technology. So we charge, as part of our cost allocation plan for IT, we charge all of our departments and our different funds to help us replace major infrastructure. And we set that aside in this reserve account.
That usually is first part of the year, right?
Yeah,
most?
well, all the departments are billed at the first part of the year, and so we usually make this transfer a little later.
Oh, okay,
So we're ready to make that transfer.
gotcha.
So if I'm a department and was billed or my contribution to this account was $100, will it change the following year and how?
It might change the following year depending upon analysis. I think our IT director right now is analyzing everything that we need to procure for the replacement. And so it could change, but I don't anticipate it changing drastically. Because we're
Okay.
setting aside monies to replace servers, switches, things like that.
So I'm looking for the algorithm and the rationale to determine how much goes into that account.
Into the reserve. So the budget in total for IT operations is about a little over $4 million. So you can see about 10% of that goes to the replacement account.
Is that an algorithm you use? Like at the end of this year, you will say, we spent this much, so we're going to put 10% of that.
Yeah, it's not really an algorithm. It's actually looking at what, anticipating what it's going to cost and what the life expectancy is of some of those major equipment replacements and trying to set aside enough money. So for example, the telephone system, we know that when we replaced it this last year, it was $750,000. So we anticipated about a 10-year life on that. And so we are setting aside $75,000 a year to replace the telephone system as part of this capital reserve. That's one example.
Okay, yeah, that's a sane thing to do. Very hard to predict in technology, but
Yeah, very hard. So that's why we really should look at it every year to say, okay, what are the cost of major infrastructures? And making sure that we're putting enough aside. Another major thing that's in this is there's a replacement for the rugged laptops that are in the sheriff's vehicles. And so next year is the year that we'll be replacing those based upon life expectancy. And so that's about $350,000 for that one-time replacement.
this is something I will harp on a little bit, which is, see that this thing about age has me bothered. It's we throw things away well before they're due. Now, IT had to replace a bunch of hardware because the new Microsoft operating system wouldn't go on the old hardware, so you need new hardware. That I understand. But these incessant arguments like my computer is 5 years old, I've got to replace it. It just seems like we're wasteful. Does it seem that way to you?
Yeah, I don't. If it's still functional, use it. I think the only time we were probably on a schedule, but I think it was mainly because they would sunset an operating system that it used. And I don't know about upgrading those things or stuff, but yeah, I think if it's still useful, it's good to have. That just brings up a point. Bailey and I were talking this morning and her trouble getting back from Georgia because of
Oh,
that
yeah.
little incident. It sounds like maybe Southwest was on older technology and they were still operating.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always careful of that because whenever you want to make advancements, you're going to have some 2 steps forwards, 1 step back kind of thing. And that shouldn't stop you from trying to improve things, but yeah, I would appreciate sometime a policy change on replacement, and we'll get told all kinds of things. With the sheriff's department in the past, it was difficult to make amendments because the sheriff at that time, not the current sheriff, would say, well, nobody's shooting at you. And I'm like, really? That's the argument?
So I know that our IT director is looking at this account and looking at how we're setting aside so that we can make adjustments and going forward for 2025.
Is there a gatekeeper in this account? That is to say, you just illustrated the computers for the sheriff's car, and you're collecting a chunk of money. Does that go into this sub-account? Or is
Yes,
it- So then if we needed the money, we wouldn't be able to reach into it without,
without a budget amendment
okay.
or putting it
And
in
that
the
would-
budget.
That would appear to the public.
Right,
Good.
right,
Okay.
right. And that leads into when you look at the expenses, which is the next page, you'll notice that we have very little budgeted to be expended this year. And we have something under supplies, but I'm going to go back and amend that budget because it really should be, it should be an IT operational expense on that one. And so we're going to amend that down to 0. But so very little in the way of expenditures. The 50,000 transfer was the amount of money that IT committed towards the Hall of Justice camera and security project. So, but I do anticipate that next year we'll have some expenditures coming through this account for some infrastructure replacements or potentially later in the year. But the IT director will submit those. And we'll have a budget amendment if we're going to have anything this year.
My expectation is that we're gonna have to spend more than we like in IT, but we've got a lot of catch up to do, and we haven't,
Yeah.
like, I should be able to walk into the IT department and pull out a manual for the IT department. It's got everything documented in there. It's not there. We got software all over the place that sometimes plays with each other, sometimes not. And we even recently discussed whether a department that wanted specialized software, whether they were going to pay for it or the IT Technology Reserve
Right.
account would pay for it.
Right.
Those are,
That was the software that we brought to you called Debt Book, that both the auditor's office is using, and now we're wanting to use it also for our bonds. And yeah, and so that was an example of the piece of software that the department was paying for, but it really benefits the entire county.
it may be that we don't see very much on the Technology Reserve account change, but on the IT contracting out to get stuff done and
Yeah.
corrected.
Okay, the next, they do have their presentation for their actual information technology. This is where most of the revenue and the expenses are held for this fund. And so on the revenue side, goods and services are the service department billings that have gone out, and those mostly were paid in the first quarter. Intergovernmental was a small grant that they received, I believe. I'm not sure if it was for a switch. And so they received some funds from that. And then their miscellaneous revenue is primarily their investment income. Because like I said, they bill all the departments in January, pretty much sit on those funds until they need to expend them. And then the other financing sources is the transfer out primarily over to the reserve account. And so on the revenue, of course, it's showing that we're 98.7% of our budget already. That's because we did all of our billings at the beginning of the year. Any questions there?
Just sort of in a general sense, if 10 of us are going to go out for lunch or something like that, and we say we'll just do one check and we'll split it equally amongst 10, that bill will always be higher than than the aggregate of us doing it individually. And I wonder if that comes into play also. So I do encourage looking at the budget there with an eye that just because the department wants some software and they think everybody's going to share and bind them that software, that we really want to, this is more for the IT director, we really want to look pretty closely, and I would assume they'd be working with you on what is rational and not from a finance standpoint.
Yeah. We've been, as far as when we're trying to budget for their expenses for IT, the largest expense that they have is their software licensing maintenance agreements. After personnel. But, and so we've been developing that list and keeping track of it and trying to analyze it as far as also projecting those annual increases that we might have from those maintenance agreements as well.
Yeah, I think there's a good rule of thumb that for whatever license you paid, you're probably going to, your maintenance is categorically 15%, but then you've got integration issues, you got training, all that. It probably doubles the 15 up to 30%. And that, I don't want to discourage people from increasing their productivity, but I want to discourage them from doing something that doesn't really increase productivity, makes them feel good, but it costs us. A good example of that was a discussion I had a few years ago with an EHU individual where they wanted to spend $250,000 on a piece of software. I said, well, how does this help the public? He said, it doesn't.
On the expenses, personnel, we're at 918,000 right now. We're year-to-date, last year at this time, we were at 947. So we're a little bit below that. We have a total of 4 vacancies as of right now in IT. So that's contributing to being below where our target was for our budget. Expended supplies are predominantly, like I said, supplies are predominantly where the category for the software licenses and maintenance agreements are. And those, when we look at them, most of those come in during the 3rd and 4th quarter of the year. So that's why it shows it's lagging, but it really isn't. We'll be seeing those expenses coming in later in the year because they're annual contracts. Some of the contracts are multi-year contracts, which help us keep those costs down on the escalations. But like I said, those will primarily be in the 3rd and 4th quarter. And then transfers out haven't been made yet. That's another large category. And so those will be being booked before the end of this quarter. And so really there isn't any other major expenses for this fund right now, showing we do have a little bit budgeted for capital, but not very much, because most of the capital will be in the reserve account. And last year, we did quite a few transfers to reposition the reserve, to put the funds in the reserve account. They hadn't made their transfers for several years for some reason, and so we caught those all up. And that's all I have for IT. And Travis had another commitment, and so he wasn't able to make today's meeting. If you have any questions for him, he's,
I think he met with both of us last
Yeah,
week
yeah, I think
individually,
so.
so
I think so.
kind of gave us his game plan, so. Okay,
Okay. That's all I have.
thanks, Kathy. We'll head right into agenda items while you're working up here, walking up, getting up to the desk. I read your response to Kelly on the request for a shooting ordinance,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm in total agreement, so I don't know if we need to go any further with that or
It's probably better to let it die.
okay, then I didn't see there was anything else to say on that. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Mike.
Get this back a little bit. Mike Moss, Public Services Director. Looks like a pretty light agenda for you guys tomorrow. Just a few items from Public Works and one from Facilities Maintenance. Number one on tomorrow's July 23rd agenda is contract completion letter to CNR Homes for roof replacement at HHS, Health and Human Services. The job was actually completed on March 1st this year. It was roof replacement, but also adding safety rails on one side up there around the HVAC equipment. It was not a lot of room to work around the HVAC equipment, so part of the task was to do that, add safety rails, and also add an internal ladder. So people were going up to the top of the roof with ladders, but an internal ladder system. The bid amount was for $329,000, and the actual final amount was $329,000. There was 0 change orders on this job,
What?
so which is
What?
great.
What?
I figured I better say that out loud since it doesn't always happen.
Well, there's always the other side of the coin. 0 change orders meant they didn't come back to you and say it's less expensive than. we
That's
thought."
true. I haven't heard that often. So that's our normal letters that we send out when we finish a contract. So,
Yeah.
Thanks.
So then the other two items from Public Works are items 3 and 4, 2 temporary construction easements for the Italian Creek Culvert Replacement Project. This culvert was damaged in the January 6, 2022 flood event. And these are just temporary easements so that we can work on the property to realign the culvert and tie in the channel.
Pretty simple.
Yes.
I'll share a couple comments with you, and this is actually a compliment to Susan and Tracy. Last Thursday, we had feedback because Susan's been working on that, the private road things. And for most of the meeting, it looked like it was pretty much an impasse. What I gathered from it there is you have when you get to the larger development, Susan's trying to write a thing that will fit that. But some of the BPAC people are saying, well, then it really doesn't work on the smaller, and how you're going to make those things work. So spent most of that meeting just sitting in a kind of an impasse. What are we going to do with this? And I'm making the assumption, because Tracy and Susan were sitting by each other, that they kind of got their heads together and by the end of the meeting, it looked like building and planning is going to take on 9 and under and build a set of standards for private road for that. Because I didn't hear anybody really have any complaints with when you got bigger than that with what you had in there. So I thought it was a good example of those two getting together and working through the problem and finding a path that we could keep walking and just sitting at this impasse. So my compliments to you two for working that out.
Yeah, I agree. That if the challenges, it sounds like from the smaller, not the true developers, but people that just want to have four lots or want to turn into 4 lots, they have the headache of trying to go through the private road, having a completely set of different process and procedures for those people makes total sense. And probably, I would guess at the end of the day, even probably keeps Public Works out of it, other than when they connect to the county road, that for 9 and under, they probably work 99% of the time just with building and planning and have a one-stop shop.
Yeah, I just thought it was good work
Yeah.
on both your parts to find a way to keep this thing moving, moving down the
Yeah.
path. The other thing I had, and I don't even know if it's under maintenance or not, I got a comment over the weekend that our flag at Expo looks terrible. That it's ripped and stuff, and I don't know if that's.
Yeah, we
indigenous
usually-
People or,
We change out ones for like our buildings, like maybe a road shop and admin, but I don't think we had a request
Oh.
for over there, but I'm going over there to drop off some signs later today for the fair rodeo.
look at it, Mike.
I'll take a look at this morning at it.
Yeah, that starts this week?
Yeah, Wednesday will be opening day of fair, correct?
So are the commissioners that are staying on, are they still obligated to join the bronc busting and the bull riding?
Yes, and also sing the national anthem.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know, in college, I was over in Ellensburg and they always had the Ellensburg rodeo. I couldn't even stay on a steer, Mike. So there's no way I'm hopping on anything on rear.
no motion items tomorrow.
Pretty simple tomorrow. You care if I bring him up to speed on Willow Grove just because? Yeah, I had a call last week and Mike and their team is working with me on it. And it's a situation, and I'll be right up front, that County, we didn't create the problem. People bought some property. Title company missed that there was a tax parcel, a tax, whatever you call that.
Yeah, tax title property.
Tax
Yeah.
title property in front of that along the road, and they didn't have legal access to the property. How a title company missed that, I don't know, but they did. So we have people that are kind of landlocked and not able to get access to build. And so Mike's kind of working with me to seeing if there's any way we can find a way to at least get them temporary so they can build that thing while a different solution comes about. But it's one of those tough things. It's nothing we did, but it's hard for me to just let people not find a solution.
So just to be clear, the tax title property means it's the state owns it. It has a title to,
Right.
I mean, the county owns it, has a title to it. I think it's always, there's no real interest in the county in holding on to it or preventing them from accessing their property. Are we talking about?
Well, I talked to Doug and stuff because it's tax title and the state has some interest in it, that they limit what you can do with it. It's, you and I think it should just be easy, but it's just not
Yeah.
easy.
How large a piece is it?
The piece we own is like 3 acres.
Correct.
Oh,
The
okay.
property, it's kind of landlocked, is about 14. And like I say, I don't, yeah.
Well, in the worst
In
case,
my conversation with Mike is I'd like to find at least a temporary solution so they can build their home. But whatever costs are associated with this, it's not on the county. At very least,
Yeah.
the title company needs to step up for missing this.
Yeah.
You're thinking of just, an easement.
Well, the two of us got a chance to meet with staff this morning before we came over to kind of gave them direction and look at a couple different options, including value of that piece of land at a certain value, and below, we're able to maybe negotiate directly with neighboring property owners. So if we can maybe get it reassessed, that might be one option for us. So we're hoping to make some phone calls today and see what kind of direction we can give you guys.
We're just trying to help people that we didn't cause a problem. with.
Right,
We're just
right.
trying to help get it solved. And
That's gonna be a problem that comes up a little bit later too, maybe for the other, there's two parcels this tax title property sits in front of that are also, will be landlocked if they want to have access to their property. So this is the first one we ran across.
And the title company didn't catch this?
they didn't. And when you look at the map, I don't know how they didn't catch it. I mean, I'm just being blunt. And I don't even know who the title company is. I don't really care. I'm not
Right,
looking to
yeah.
bash. I'm just saying somebody made a mistake and they should be working awful hard to fix this. And maybe they are. I don't know.
And I feel bad, the homeowners have already reached out to a local company to build their house. They went in for, I think probably planning clearance, and then found out they did not have access to their home or to their lot. So it came only to their light when they went downstairs to the building and planning to try to move forward with their building plans.
How do they get to their lot right now?
They were, I think, driving across that tax title, not knowing that it wasn't theirs.
So there's a road there?
It might have been an old driveway. I'm not exactly sure.
I haven't been out to look at
Yeah,
it, so I'm
yeah.
not quite sure.
Yeah. From what I understand from the real estate agent, there was an old existing driveway.
Yeah. No matter how careful you are and you get your title insurance,
Yeah.
these things happen.
Correct.
So that's just more to, just in case you hear something.
Yeah.
You're up to speed.
Location approximately?
Willow Grove.
Okay.
So when we hear more news, which I'm expecting to hear this week, Commissioner, we'll pass that information on to you and also the homeowners.
In the hollow?
Pardon me?
In the hollow?
Yes.
I hope they research things well.
Yeah.
You know how they resolved the pump situation there? Remember, they have such a short, small tax base, and they had some pretty serious obligations on the pumps.
I believe they bought a temporary pump, so that when the gets really high, they can hook that up and get that running too, not a temporary pump, but an auxiliary pump that's not hooked up to the floats. And then they will run a line over the roadway to give them some extra pumping power.
Wow. And so they're planning to build in the hollow.
This property?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's kind of an interesting location for sure. It's your district.
Yep. I cover a lot of area, unfortunately. I do have one other thing because it's not like I just walk in your office and sit down with you. Have you, we have staff, our clerk and Kathy and them are trying to put some food service back in Hall of Justice.
Right.
Have you heard some of the
Haven't heard
issues they're
anything.
having with that?
I don't recall.
And I'm paraphrasing, but we're getting some pushback from legal that maybe we can't do that. I'll put it this way, and I meant to be 100% correct but what I'm hearing is we don't see anything in the law that says you can't, but we don't see that there's anything that says you can, so you can't. That's the way I interpret it.
Yeah.
So I'm, it seems like a pretty simple thing to me, so I don't know if we
Yeah,
should
there-
discuss that a little bit and just push forward. It just, they've done some pretty good work, and it's just,
I think we have this, you and I probably have the same outlook. If we were all to follow exactly the laws that are on the books, we would all find out that we're violating multiple laws. I think I read some articles sometime that said at any one point in time, a third of the nation is committing a felony just by doing what you would normally
Yeah.
do. And then there's the other situation, if most of the time the laws are intended to be for situations they ran into, not for the situation you're in. So you don't ask permission, you just do it. And if it's a problem, you will get, if it causes a problem, then something will happen. But we've had food services before.
I think some of the concern is that we're not having another vendor do it, we're doing it ourselves. And basically what they have set up in place is we have a local coffee vendor that'll give it or provide us the supplies and stuff, and we'll be able to do that. And we have a local vendor that'll make up a variety of
Right.
lunches, and we'll be able to sell that. So we're just kind of acting as the middle person, and the way they've lined it out that it should cover itself. We get enough markup that we can cover.
Yeah, they did go over that with me. I apologize. I forgot that, anyhow. I'm a little skeptical, but you don't learn if you don't try.
Yeah. So I'm kind of inclined just to push forward.
I'll support that, particularly staff-driven or people-driven things. They're putting out the extra effort. Why stand in their way?
Yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm with
Yeah.
you. And if it works, it works. There's nothing over there right now. So I think all of us would probably like seeing something.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the list of my miscellaneous. You got to sit through them all. We have Jessica at 11, and she does have an executive session, and it involves Superior Court, so we won't be able to move that up. So we just would recess till 11.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, we'll reset. I think we kind of like doing that to Commissioner Morris.
I am here.
Okay, so we're back from recess. We're under. Ryan, we have executive session. Potential litigation is what I'm seeing here. Time frame on it? 20 minutes? Okay. We will break to executive session, 20 minutes, potential litigation. Okay, back from executive session. No decisions were made. Jessica, did you have anything else in HR?
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. I have one request this morning from Corrections. They're requesting to fill their Corrections Specialist 3 position. The employee is choosing to move back to a Corrections Officer position, so they would like to fill her position along with any domino effect, because this could be filled internally. And they're also requesting 2-month overlap for training purposes due to her involvement in payroll processing.
I need some clarification. So there's a person on staff now that wants to change assignment.
Correct. She previously was a corrections officer, also a captain. She's been in a clerical role for several years now, and she'd like to go back to a corrections officer position.
And we still have openings in the correctional officer position.
Correct, yes.
Right. So then the dominoes.
Yeah, and there's other clerical staff that may apply for her position that may create other openings.
Got it. Okay,
And Marin should be online too if you have any questions for her.
Okay.
we're good.
Are you good with the overlap as well?
2 week for training.
2 months
2
for
months,
training.
yeah.
I don't like to quibble about really small change. It seems like it's a substantial overlap, but that's okay. Marin is looking at me.
We may not need the 2-month overlap, but Amy's does, our payroll is really pretty complex. So I just, I think we may be able to do it with a month, but it could be 2 months at the most. Because
Okay.
she would have to train the internal and then the internal person will have to train the new person. So there's two series of
Yeah,
trainings that'll have to happen.
I'm good.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you.
And that's my only request this morning.
Okay. We have nothing else? Okay, we will adjourn.